A bride runs away from an arranged marriage with a powerful CEO just minutes before walking down the aisle. Stay until the end to see how this drama unfolds. Han Ji-eun is a determined young woman, 26 years old, working as an assistant at a large fashion company in Seoul. Coming from a humble family, she grew up facing hardships, but that never made her give up on her dreams. Ji-eun dreams of becoming a renowned designer, someone who creates pieces that tell stories, just like the clothes she always admired in shop windows. Despite her talent, she finds herself stuck in a routine job that doesn't allow her to grow, constantly performing administrative tasks and catering to the whims of her superiors. She lives in a small apartment with her best friend, Seo Mi-kyung, an extroverted woman who is always willing to help Ji-eun, even in the most absurd situations. Mi-kyung, who works as a freelance makeup artist, often cheers Ji-eun up when she's overwhelmed. Despite her lively personality, Mi-kyung is incredibly loyal and always stands by Ji-eun, ready for any adventure or difficulty. The story begins with a typical day in Ji-eun's life, balancing her tedious job, caring for her sick mother, and finding brief escapes with Mi-kyung, like grabbing coffee or daydreaming about a different life. Ji-eun is a woman who feels invisible, her talent unrecognized, but she holds on to hope that something will change in her life. However, Ji-eun's fate seems to be heading in a direction completely different from her dreams. Since she was young, she knew that her marriage had already been arranged by her parents, a common practice among traditional Korean families, especially those with business connections. Her father, now deceased, had made an agreement with one of the wealthiest families in Korea, the Kang family, who own a large investment and technology corporation. Although Ji-eun's family isn't rich, her mother has old ties to the Kangs, and this marriage was seen as a way to unite the two families in a beneficial alliance. Ji-eun's fiancé is Kang Min-jae, the powerful CEO of the Kang Group, a man known for his cold demeanor and his ability to conduct business without any emotional involvement. At 32, Min-jae is one of South Korea's most successful and sought-after businessmen. He has never shown interest in Ji-eun, and in fact, for him, the marriage is just another business agreement. He grew up under the pressure of his father, Kang Sung-ho, who always placed the company above any family or emotional ties. As a result, Min-jae became a rigid, solitary person, admired for his competence but feared by those around him. As the wedding day approaches, Ji-eun feels increasingly suffocated. She never wanted this kind of life, where her feelings are ignored for the sake of commercial interests. Even though she has met Min-jae a few times, the interactions were cold and formal, leaving no room for dialogue or emotional connection. Every time she thinks about the wedding, she feels a heavy weight on her chest, as if she is about to lose her freedom forever. The marriage has become a prison for Ji-eun, and she feels that if she accepts it, she will be giving up on herself and her dreams. In her meetings with Min-jae, the conversations are always about business, contracts, and rules to follow after the marriage. Min-jae doesn't try to hide that. For him, this is simply a convenient agreement to maintain appearances and strengthen the position of both families. He is practical and sees Ji-eun as nothing more than a part of the plan, without caring about her feelings or desires. Even so, the family pressure is immense. Ji-eun's mother, always concerned about the family's finances and social standing, insists that she accept the marriage, saying it's the best for everyone. Ji-eun's relationship with her mother is complicated. On one hand, she understands the sacrifices her mother made over the years to support her, especially after her father's death. But on the other hand, she feels that her mother doesn't understand her true desires. Ji-eun struggles with this guilt, torn between wanting to please her mother and the deep desire to follow her own dreams. The figure of Kang Min-jae becomes a symbol of the prison that Ji-eun feels is closing in on her. He is the perfect CEO, handsome, intelligent, and incredibly successful. But to her, he is a stranger who represents everything she never wanted for herself. At the same time, Min-jae cannot see Ji-eun as anything more than a timid and submissive young woman, just another cog in the meticulously planned machine of his controlled life. While Ji-eun tries to keep her daily life on track, mentally preparing for the wedding, her best friend Mi-kyung is the only person who knows her true emotions. Mi-kyung encourages her to think about her own happiness and tries to suggest that she has a choice, even though the circumstances seem overwhelming. You can't marry someone you don't even know. And worse, someone you don't love. Ji-yoon, Mi-kyung always says, trying to make her see that life is more than family obligations. But Ji-yoon, torn between duty and freedom, cannot imagine going against her mother and the heavy cultural weight she carries. As the wedding date approaches, Ji-yoon's days become a whirlwind of emotions. The fear of losing her identity grows with each passing day. Every detail of the wedding is meticulously planned by the families, from the luxurious venue to the guest list, which includes the biggest names in high society. But none of these details matter to Ji-yoon. What consumes her is the thought of spending the rest of her life with a man who doesn't see her as a person, but as a mere object in a transaction. The big day finally arrives. Ji-yoon wakes up with an emptiness in her chest, as if the world around her is slowly crumbling. The sun shining outside seems unable to reach her heart, which is consumed by a mixture of panic and sadness. Her mother, radiant with happiness, carefully prepares her, supervising every detail of the luxurious wedding dress, meticulously chosen to represent the prestige of the Kang and Han families. The white silk gown is flawless, with fine hand-embroidered lace. But to Ji-eun, it feels like a heavy armor, trapping her. As the maids adjust her veil and make the final touches to her hair and makeup, Ji-eun can hardly breathe. Her mind is far away, lost in thoughts of everything she is about to lose. Her dream of becoming a designer, her freedom, her right to choose her own path. The image of Min-jae, the man she barely knows, sends shivers down her spine. To him, she will be nothing more than a display wife, a pawn in his power game. Ji-eun feels suffocated, unable to escape the fate that has been imposed on her. Seo Mi-kyung, her best friend and confidant, stands by her side in the dressing room. She is the only one who truly understands the emotional storm Ji-eun is facing. Mi-kyung, with her vibrant and rebellious personality, tries to calm her with a joke or two, but even she knows that what is about to happen is no laughing matter. She watches Ji-eun with growing concern, realizing that her friend is on the verge of collapse. "You don't have to do this, Ji-eun," Mi-kyung says in a firm whisper, holding her hand. "There's still time to say no." Ji-eun's eyes fill with tears, but she slowly shakes her head, too afraid to respond. Mi-kyung has always been the voice of reason, the free spirit Ji-eun wished she could be, but the weight of family expectations seems to crush her. She feels like she has no choice. Her mother enters the dressing room with a proud smile, barely noticing her daughter's internal conflict. Ji-eun knows that to her mother, this marriage is a matter of survival, a way to ensure that they never have to struggle financially again. The wedding is set to take place in a luxurious cathedral in the heart of Seoul. Outside, dozens of photographers, journalists, and curious onlookers are waiting to capture what promises to be the event of the year. The elite of Korea's business and social circles are present, all in their places, awaiting the moment when Ji-eun and Min-jae will officially unite. To the public, everything seems perfect. The most sought-after CEO in the country, with his seemingly happy bride, sealing a powerful alliance between two families. But deep down, Ji-eun is panicking. As the ceremony draws closer, she feels her feet growing heavier, as if they are glued to the ground. Her heart is pounding so fast she fears she might faint. She knows that once she walks down that church aisle and says yes, her life will never be the same again. The silence between her and Min-jae during all their meetings, the coldness in his eyes, and the fact that he doesn't care about her feelings confirm to Ji-eun that this will not be a marriage of love, but of convenience. She will be nothing more than a wife for show, a piece in the puzzle of his meticulously controlled life. As she looks in the mirror, Ji-eun sees the reflection of a woman she doesn't recognize. The dress, the perfect hair, the forced smile. The woman staring back at her is not the same Han Ji-eun who once dreamed of becoming a designer and conquering the world with her talent. She feels erased, as if her entire identity has been removed to make her fit into someone else's life. The feeling of despair grows with each passing second. Mi-kyung watches Ji-eun with a serious expression and finally speaks. "Ji-eun, Listen to me. If you really don't want this, we can leave now. I'll help you. No matter what happens after, I'll be with you. But you need to decide. At that moment, Mi-kyung's words break through the wall of fear and obligation. Something inside Ji-eun begins to awaken. She looks at her friend, who stares back at her with seriousness, offering an escape. A chance to be free. The panic in her chest is replaced by a sudden resolution. She can't go through with this wedding. Not with Kang Min-jae. Not like this, not under these circumstances. Ji-eun stands up suddenly, the heavy dress trailing behind her, and takes a deep breath. I can't do this, she whispers, more to herself than to Mi-kyung. Mi-kyung smiles slightly, having expected this reaction, and grabs her hand. Then let's go, now. Without thinking twice, Ji-eun and Mi-kyung quickly leave the dressing room. They walk through the church corridors where the final preparations are being made and head as discreetly as possible toward a side exit. The tension is palpable. With every step, Ji-eun feels like someone might stop them, but no one notices what's happening. Everyone is focused on the grandeur of the wedding, on the expectations of a perfect ceremony, and this gives them the perfect chance to escape. When they reach the street, Ji-eun feels the cool air on her face, and for a moment, the adrenaline takes over her body. She is really running away from her own wedding. Fear mixes with the euphoria of freedom. Still dressed as a bride, Ji-eun and Mi-kyung get into a taxi and give quick instructions to the driver. They don't have a concrete plan, but the important thing is to get away as fast as possible. As the taxi speeds away, Ji-eun looks back and sees the cathedral growing smaller in the distance. She can hardly believe what she has just done. Part of her is terrified of the consequences, Kang Min-jae's fury, her mother's disappointment, the scandal that will follow. But at the same time, a bigger part of her feels immense relief. For the first time in a long time, she feels like she's taking control of her own life. On the other side of the city, Kang Min-jae stands at the altar, calmly adjusting his cufflinks as he waits for the ceremony to begin. He is impassive, as always, treating the wedding as just another commitment to be fulfilled. When the news of Ji-eun's escape reaches his ears, a wave of silent fury washes over him. No one had ever dared to challenge him like this, and he won't allow Han Ji-eun or anyone else to publicly humiliate him in this way. Kang Min-jae, still standing at the Grand Cathedral's altar, watches the growing commotion around him. His impassive gaze doesn't reveal the rising fury inside. The bride had vanished, disappearing minutes before the ceremony, and the deafening silence in the wedding hall quickly gives way to whispers, murmurs, and perplexed glances. He never imagined that anyone would dare challenge him, least of all the timid Han Ji-eun, the woman he had always considered a mere piece in his strategic family alliance. When his personal assistant Lee Soo-jin discreetly approaches to inform him of Ji-eun's escape, Min-jae remains motionless. He is known for his unshakable control, never letting his emotions show. But at this moment, something inside him cracks. His pride, meticulously built over years as an implacable CEO, has been wounded in front of the country's elite, the most important business people in Korea. He knows that once the news spreads, the tabloids will revel in the public humiliation he has suffered. For Kang Min-jae, this is unacceptable. Without betraying his anger, he turns to Lee Soo-jin and says in a cold tone, "Find her." The assistant immediately starts making calls, coordinating a search for the runaway bride. Min-jae's power is such that within minutes he has multiple teams looking for Ji-eun across the city. He will not allow her to simply disappear from his life, not without consequences. Kang Min-jae is used to always being in control, and this time will be no different. Meanwhile, Ji-eun and Mi-kyung are in a taxi, navigating the busy streets of Seoul. Ji-eun's heart is still racing, but the adrenaline from the escape is slowly being replaced by reality. She looks out the window, watching the bustling city pass by, its streets full of life, a stark contrast to what felt like the end of her freedom. For the first time in a long time, she feels like she's taken charge of her own life. However, what Ji-eun doesn't know is that Min-jae has unlimited resources and a determination that borders on obsession. He won't give up easily. She is still far from being free of his reach. Mi-kyung, sitting next to Ji-eun, tries to calm her with a smile, but she too is aware that Min-jae is not the type of man to simply accept public humiliation. We need to hide for a while until things calm down, Mi-kyung suggests, nervously glancing at the rearview mirror as if expecting them to be followed at any moment. You know he'll come after you, right? Ji-eun takes a deep breath, her emotions still tangled. She knows Mi-kyung is right, but at that moment, all she wants is distance from that world of suffocating rules and impossible expectations. She can't live as a puppet anymore, controlled by others, even if it means facing the consequences of her escape. They decide to go to a small apartment that Mi-kyung secretly rents, which she uses as a studio for her makeup work. It's a modest place, hidden in one of the quieter, less frequented areas of Seoul. Once there, Ji-eun takes off the heavy wedding dress and changes into simple clothes that Mi-kyung offers her. The gown, now discarded on the floor, symbolizes the oppression she has just managed to leave behind, if only for a brief moment. As the two of them try to think about their next steps, Ji-eun's phone begins to ring incessantly. She doesn't need to look to know it's her mother, the Kang family, and possibly even Min-jae calling. Each ring makes her tremble, reminding her of the world she's running from. The panic starts to rise again, and Mi-kyung notices. You can't answer them right now. Not until you're ready, Mi-kyung says, taking the phone and turning it off. I know it feels impossible, but you did the right thing. You can't marry a man who never even tried to understand you. But as they hide in the small apartment, Min-jae is organizing an implacable operation. He is not the kind of man to leave a problem unresolved. He doesn't just want to find Ji-eun, but also to understand what drove her to flee so suddenly. Why did she dare defy him? Until that moment, he had never seen her as someone capable of acting on her own, and that disturbs him deeply. The pursuit begins. Min-jae's personal security team tracks the taxi they took, using traffic cameras and monitoring Ji-eun's phone calls and credit card transactions. He knows the city is large, but his resources are larger. It won't be long before he finds out where she is. Meanwhile, in the hideout, Ji-eun begins to process what she has just done. Running away from the wedding was an act of desperation, but also of courage. She had always lived in fear of others' expectations, especially her mother's, who saw the marriage to Min-jae as the solution to all their problems. But Ji-eun didn't want to live the life others had chosen for her. For the first time, she felt like she was fighting for something of her own, even if it was uncertain, even if it was difficult. However, as the hours pass, the feeling of freedom begins to be replaced by growing fear. She knows she can't escape forever. Min-jae is not the type of man to forgive this kind of humiliation, and Ji-eun fears that her family will face consequences as well. After all, the marriage wasn't just about her and Min-jae, but about the future of their families, about the contract that bound them both. And it's at this point that the door of the small apartment where they're hiding is suddenly knocked. The sound is firm, urgent, as if whoever is outside knows they're there. Ji-eun and Mi-kyung exchange silent looks, frozen with fear. Outside, Kang Min-jae stands, impassive, his cold gaze fixed on the door. He has finally found her. Han Ji-eun. His voice echoes from the other side of the door, calm but hiding an inner storm. Open the door. Let's talk. Ji-eun feels the blood freeze in her veins. She knows she can't avoid this encounter forever. And although her heart is racing with fear, she realizes that this conversation will be an inevitable confrontation, one that could change both of their fates. Ji-eun is frozen in place upon hearing Kang Min-jae's cold, authoritative voice from the other side of the door. The deep, controlled sound, though quiet, reverberates in her mind as a clear reminder of the immense power difference between them. Everything around her seems to stop. Mi-kyung, by her side, also understands the gravity of the situation. But unlike Ji-eun, she doesn't freeze. With quick steps, she moves toward the window, checking if there's another way to escape. Ji-eun, we don't have to open the door, Mi-kyung whispers, her eyes blazing with determination. He can't force us to do anything. However, Ji-eun knows this isn't entirely true. Minjae may not be physically aggressive, but his social, economic, and emotional power is overwhelming. More than that, something in the tone of his voice makes her realize that the situation has escalated far beyond a simple escape. Minjae is not the type of man to accept losing control, and she feels that if she doesn't face him now, the weight of the consequences will fall not only on her, but also on her family. And even on Mi-kyung. This makes her hesitate. As the knock on the door echoes again, this time a little firmer, Ji-eun decides that she can't delay the inevitable any longer. "I need to talk to him," she whispers, her heart tightening in her chest. Mi-kyung looks at her with a hard expression, disagreeing, but respecting her friend's decision. "I'll be right here. If you need help, I'm on your side," she reassures her, showing that no matter what happens, Ji-eun isn't alone in this fight. Taking a deep breath, Ji-eun walks to the door, her hands trembling as she unlocks it. When she opens it, she finds Kang Min-jae standing there, as imposing as ever, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. His face is a mask of coldness, but his eyes, locked onto Ji-eun's, are filled with dangerous intensity. As he sees her for a brief moment, he seems to examine every detail. From her simple clothes, starkly different from the wedding dress she should have been wearing, to the subtle tension in her posture, which betrays her nervousness. "You took your time," Min-jae says calmly, his voice as cold as steel, devoid of any emotion. "But I expected you to do something like this." Ji-eun remains silent for a few seconds, feeling small under his overwhelming presence. She wants to respond, to argue, but the words are caught in her throat. All she feels is a mixture of fear, guilt, and a slight pang of regret for running away without considering the consequences. Min-jae steps forward, uninvited, and closes the door behind him. The apartment seems to shrink around him, and Ji-eun feels the heavy energy he brings with him. Although his actions are controlled, it's clear that he's at the limit of his patience. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he asks, his voice laced with a chill that makes her shiver. "Running away from the wedding wasn't just an affront to me. It was a public humiliation. You've dishonored your family and mine." Ji-eun finally finds her voice, though it's quiet and trembling. I couldn't go through with it," she begins, her eyes cast down. "That's not how I want to live. I can't marry someone I don't know, someone who doesn't respect me as a person." Min-jae raises an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her boldness. "Respect? I'm trying to save your family from financial ruin, and you're worried about respect?" He steps closer, his presence becoming even more oppressive. "This marriage isn't just about you, Ji-eun. It's about responsibilities. It's about honoring what was agreed upon." The coldness in Min-jae's words hits her like a blow. He doesn't see her as a woman with dreams, hopes, and fears, but as a part of a contract, a business transaction. Ji-eun, though frightened, feels a wave of indignation rising within her. She has always been calm, always sacrificed for others, but now, in this moment, she can't stay silent anymore. "Is that all I am to you? A business? An obligation?" The words come out stronger than she expected. "I'm not a piece of your empire, Min-jae. I'm a person, and I won't sacrifice my life for something you or my mother decided for me." Min-jae stands in silence for a few moments, clearly taken aback by her reaction. He had never seen Ji-eun stand up for herself like this. Until now, she had always been submissive, timid, easy to control. But the woman standing before him now is different, and as much as he hates to admit it, this change affects him in a way he didn't expect. "Do you think you can just run away from your responsibilities?" Min-jae replies, now with a hint of frustration in his voice. "The consequences of your escape go beyond you. Your mother will be ruined. Our alliance is at stake. And you're willing to risk all of that for what? For some romantic idea of freedom?" Ji-eun feels a sharp pain in her chest when she thinks about her mother, but even so, she remains firm. "My mother always told me to do what was best for our family. But is it fair for me to sacrifice my happiness for that? Would you do the same if you were in my place?" The question makes Min-jae hesitate. For the first time, he seems to consider what Ji-eun is saying. He, who has always followed his father's expectations and society's demands, has never stopped to think if he would have done anything differently if given the choice. Everything in his life has been built around duty, around control. But now, faced with this woman he had underestimated, he begins to question his own decisions. For a brief moment, Min-jae's gaze softens, but only for an instant. He quickly regains his rigid posture, as if protecting himself from something he doesn't fully understand. That doesn't change the fact that you made a wrong choice, Ji-eun. And choices have consequences, he declares, his voice regaining its former icy tone. You want freedom? I can give you that, but you'll have to deal with the weight of your decisions. And trust me, they will be heavy. Ji-eun, as scared as she is, realizes that Min-jae is not just the cold man she thought him to be. He too is a product of his environment, just like her. Both of them are trapped by their families and the expectations that surround them. She sees this in his eyes, a shadow of doubt, a hesitation he tries to hide. If you really want me to come back, Min-jae, you need to see me as more than a business deal. I'm not a commodity. And if you can't see me that way, then let me go, Ji-eun says, her voice firm but not angry, just determined. Min-jae doesn't respond immediately. He looks at Ji-eun as if seeing her for the first time. The woman standing in front of him is no longer the scared, submissive bride. She is someone willing to fight for what she believes in, even knowing she might lose everything. Without another word, Min-jae turns and walks toward the door. Before leaving, he pauses and in a barely audible voice says, "This isn't over, Ji-eun. Don't think I'm just going to accept your decision. You still have a lot to learn about what it means to face consequences." And with that, he leaves, leaving Ji-eun alone in the small apartment, breathing deeply and trying to process everything that just happened. After the tense confrontation with Kang Min-jae, Ji-eun spends the following days in a mixture of relief and uncertainty. She's relieved to have faced Min-jae, but at the same time, she can't stop thinking about his words. His veiled threat, "This isn't over," lingers in her mind, constantly reminding her that although she escaped, her situation is far from resolved. Mi-kyung tries to distract her, suggesting that they flee to another city, maybe even leave the country. However, Ji-eun knows that running away forever is not a real solution. In the days that follow, Ji-eun takes refuge in Mi-kyung's studio, still keeping a low profile, hidden from her family and from Min-jae. But at the same time, she tries to get her life back on track. Without the immediate pressure of the wedding, Ji-eun feels, for the first time in years, that she has a chance to think about herself and what she truly wants. She starts drawing again, sketching designs of dresses and fashion collections. Creating has always been her escape, and now, it seems to be the only thing keeping her grounded amidst the chaos. However, during these quiet days, an unexpected twist comes. One day, while she's sitting in a cafe with Mi-kyung, her phone rings. The number is unknown, but the voice on the other end is impossible to mistake. It's her mother, Han Soo-jin. Her voice sounds desperate, and Ji-eun feels a knot tighten in her stomach as she listens. "Ji-eun, we need to talk. Now," her mother says without preamble. "This isn't just about the wedding anymore. It's about our family. You need to come home." Confused and worried, Ji-eun reluctantly agrees to meet her. Something about her mother's tone tells her that the situation is serious. When she arrives at her family's home, she is greeted by a grim atmosphere. Han Soo-jin is sitting at the table, looking tired and worn out. She hesitates for a moment before beginning to speak, as though she's been carrying a heavy secret for a long time. "Do you think I wanted you to marry Kang Min-jae just for convenience, Ji-eun?" her mother asks, her voice breaking. "It wasn't just for the money. It wasn't just for the prestige." Ji-eun stares at her, feeling the weight of a revelation about to unfold. "Then why, mother? Why did you push me into this?" Her mother takes a deep breath, tears brimming in her eyes. "Because we are in debt to the Kang family. We have been for years." The revelation hits Ji-eun like a bombshell. Her mother explains that shortly after her father's death, the Han family fell into a devastating financial crisis. With nowhere else to turn, Sujin sought help from the Kang family, who not only saved the Han family business but also kept them from losing their home. However, this help came at a steep price. An unspoken agreement that when the time was right, Ji-eun would marry Kang Min-jae to seal the alliance between the two families. I never wanted this for you, Sujin admits, sobbing. But I had no choice. I thought this would give you a better life, a secure life. I thought I was protecting you. Ji-eun is in shock, her mind trying to process everything. She had always known there were expectations and pressures on her, but she never imagined that her own family was so deeply entangled in an agreement with the Kangs. Everything she believed about the marriage, about why her mother had forced her to accept it, had been distorted by this harsh truth. Despite the shock, something inside Ji-eun starts to shift. She now understands that the arranged marriage wasn't just a matter of tradition or financial interest. It was her mother's desperate attempt to save them. At the same time, knowing about this agreement makes her feel even more trapped, as though she's fighting against a force far bigger than she had imagined. With the weight of this new information, Ji-eun can't help but think of Min-jae differently. Everything he said, the pressures on him, starts to make sense. He isn't just the cold businessman who only cares about deals. He too is trapped by his family's expectations, just like her. While Ji-eun is still hurt and resentful for how he treated the marriage as a transaction, she begins to see that he too is carrying a heavy burden. After leaving her mother's house, Ji-eun feels the need to get answers directly from Min-jae. She wants to understand how much he knew about this arrangement, how involved he was, and why he never mentioned what was truly at stake. Determined, she picks up the phone and calls him, asking to meet. To her surprise, Min-jae agrees immediately. The meeting is arranged at one of the Kang Group's offices, away from prying eyes. When Ji-eun arrives, she finds Min-jae already waiting for her, sitting in a luxurious conference room but with a different expression. He looks tired, almost vulnerable, something she's never seen in him before. I know about the debt, Ji-eun begins without preamble. My mother told me everything. Min-jae watches her in silence for a few seconds before responding, his voice calm but serious. I knew you'd find out eventually. I didn't think your mother would tell you, but I'm not surprised. Ji-eun approaches the table, crossing her arms in a protective stance. Why didn't you ever tell me? You knew this marriage wasn't just an agreement between the two of us. You knew you were tying me to something far bigger than I could ever have imagined. Min-jae sighs, his eyes locked on hers. I knew about the debt, yes, but I didn't think it mattered to you. I always imagined that, like me, you would accept your role without question. I grew up with these conditions, Ji-eun. My whole life has been shaped by these kinds of agreements. I thought you would understand what was at stake. Ji-eun feels a wave of anger and frustration rising in her chest. Understand? You never gave me the chance to understand. You never tried to see me as someone with dreams and desires. You just treated me as part of a transaction. Min-jae stands, moving closer to her, his gaze firm but without the coldness she's used to seeing. And do you think I wanted this? He counters, his voice finally revealing the tension he's been carrying. I grew up being prepared to take on responsibilities I never chose. I thought that if I kept control, I could handle anything. But you challenged me in ways I didn't expect. The silence between them grows, heavy with conflicting emotions. Ji-eun realizes at that moment that Min-jae too is a victim of his family's expectations, just like her. But that doesn't change the fact that he hurt her, that he ignored her feelings in favor of his own priorities. I'm not you, Min-jae, and I won't sacrifice myself the way you have, she finally says, her voice firm but soft. Min-jae looks into her eyes, and for the first time, something genuine passes through his gaze. He realizes that to keep her by his side, he can no longer treat her as just another piece of his carefully controlled life. If he wants any chance with Ji-eun, he needs to change. And that, for him, is a challenge he never expected to face. You're right, he admits, lowering his head slightly. I can't force you into anything. If you want to leave, I won't try to stop you anymore. but I want you to know that for the first time, I'm willing to change. Not for our families, but for me. And for you. The unexpected sincerity in Minjae's words catches Ji-yoon off guard. She's still hurt, still confused, but she sees that behind the rigid, controlling facade, there's a man trying to understand his own feelings. A man who, perhaps, is willing to give up control for the sake of something greater. She doesn't respond immediately. The path forward is still uncertain. But at that moment, Ji-yoon realizes that something has changed between them. The days following Ji-yoon's meeting with Kang Min-jae are filled with uncertainty and deep reflection. Ji-yoon feels like she's at a crucial point in her life, where every decision she makes from now on will shape her future. Even though the truth about her family's debt and the real reason behind the arranged marriage has come to light, it doesn't solve the most important question. What does she truly want for herself? Ji-yoon spends sleepless nights thinking about her life, her dreams, and her feelings for Min-jae. Despite everything that has happened, she can't forget the vulnerability she saw in him during their last meeting. For the first time, the ruthless CEO seemed human, someone who was also lost in the weight of family expectations and imposed duties. That touches her in a way she didn't expect. However, Ji-yoon still feels the need to distance herself to better understand her feelings and focus on her future, away from the shadow of the arranged marriage. Determined to find clarity, Ji-yoon decides to leave Seoul for a few days, traveling to a small coastal town where she used to spend holidays as a child. There, she hopes to find peace and time to reorganize her emotions. Mi-kyung supports her decision, promising to handle everything while she's away. You need time alone, Ji-yoon. Go and figure out what your heart really wants. Only then will you be able to make a true decision, her friend advises. While Ji-yoon is away, Min-jae also faces his own internal struggles. He finds himself in an unfamiliar position. For the first time in his life, someone has truly challenged him. Not in a business setting, but on a personal level. Ji-eun made him question his choices, his way of living, and above all, the emotional void he had always ignored. He realizes that, to keep her by his side, he needs to be someone different. Someone he's not sure he can be. But the truth is, in Ji-eun's absence, Min-jae begins to miss her in a way he has never missed anyone before. With Ji-eun gone, Min-jae makes an important decision. He calls for an emergency meeting with the Kang Group's board of directors and, in an unexpected move, announces that he's taking a temporary leave of absence from the company. This announcement shocks everyone present, including his right hand, Lee Soo-jin, who tries to dissuade him. President, what's going on? This isn't like you. You've never taken time off, she protests, clearly concerned. But Min-jae is firm in his decision. He knows he needs to step away from the company and the pressures that have always controlled him to understand what he really wants. For the first time, he's choosing not to follow the path that was laid out for him. Meanwhile, in the small coastal town, Ji-eun finds some of the peace she was looking for. The sound of the waves, the smell of the sea, and the simplicity of the place help her slow down and listen to her own thoughts. She spends her days drawing, creating new designs, and reconnecting with her love for fashion. Through this process, she realizes that her talent is beyond what others expected of her. She begins to sketch ideas for a fashion collection inspired by her personal journey, a collection that symbolizes her fight for freedom and self-discovery. However, even with this newfound creative purpose, Ji-eun can't ignore the conflicting feelings she has for Min-jae. She knows he is more than just the cold man she met at the beginning. Something has changed in him, just as it has in her. And the question that haunts her is, could they possibly change together? Or would it be better for them to part ways? After a few days of contemplation, Ji-eun decides to return to Seoul. She feels ready to face reality, whatever decision she makes. When she returns, the first thing she does is visit her mother. Han Soo-jin is anxious to know how her daughter is doing, but she also carries visible guilt for everything she revealed about the debt and the arranged marriage. Ji-eun, however, no longer blames her. Although she was initially hurt, she now understands that her mother did what she thought was best to protect them. They talk, and Ji-eun finally feels at peace with her mother, realizing that both of them were victims of a larger system. Shortly after, Ji-yoon receives an unexpected message from Min-jae, asking to meet. She hesitates for a moment but knows that this meeting is necessary for both of them. They meet in a quiet cafe, away from the public eye. When Min-jae arrives, he looks different. He no longer has the usual rigid posture of the CEO, but rather a softer, almost vulnerable expression. "I've taken a leave from the company," Min-jae begins, breaking the silence. "For the first time, I'm trying to understand what I really want. And I've realized that for a long time, I followed the path that others set for me. But now, for the first time, I want to follow my own path." Ji-eun listens in silence, letting him speak. Min-jae takes a deep breath and continues. "I know I hurt you. I know I treated you like part of an agreement. But I want you to know that that has changed. If you still want to leave, I won't stop you. But if there's any chance, I'd like to try something real between us. Not for our families, not for a contract, but because I believe we could be more than that." Min-jae's words are sincere, and Ji-eun feels an unexpected emotion rise within her. She realizes that he is willing to change, to give up the control he's always held so tightly, and that this is something he has never done for anyone before. However, Ji-eun also knows she has to be honest with herself. "I can't just forget everything that happened," Ji-eun replies gently. "But I also know that something has changed. I need time, Min-jae. Time to figure out what I truly want. I can't promise anything right now, but I'm willing to see where this leads." Min-jae nods, accepting her response. He knows he can't force her into anything, and that time is what they both need. But for the first time, he feels hopeful. Hopeful that maybe they can build something together, not out of obligation, but out of choice. The story ends with Ji-eun looking toward the future with a new perspective. She has chosen her own path, and now, every step she takes will be guided by her own decisions. Min-jae, for his part, begins to understand that control isn't everything, and that true power lies in accepting vulnerability. Their future together is still uncertain, but both are ready to rewrite their stories, whether together or apart, with the freedom to choose. If you're enjoying this drama, don't forget to leave a like to support the channel. And if you're not yet subscribed, click the subscribe button and activate the bell so you don't miss any of the next chapters. We want to know what you think. Will Ji-eun be able to escape Kang Min-jae? Or will something unexpected happen? Leave your comment with your theories and join this journey with us.